magnet on my oven that says, "Sometimes I open my mouth and my mother comes out." It makes me chuckle because it's kind of true sometimes. Maybe a lot of times. One thing I remember my mom saying when I was growing up, especially when my brothers and I were kind of loud, was, "Please be quiet. I can't hear myself think." I can't believe how many times I say that now, both to my kids and to myself. At least for me, it's hard to hear my own thoughts when there's so much extra noise going on around me. If I'm trying to concentrate on something, I can't have music with words playing because I'm kind of like a squirrel and I get distracted by the words. So oftentimes when I am working, I will be listening to instrumental music, and it's fantastic. On the third day, there was a wedding in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine gave out, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." And Jesus said to her, "Woman, what concern is that to you and to me? My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Now standing there were 6 stone water jars for the Jewish rites of purification, each holding 20 or 30 gallons. Jesus said to them, "Fill the jars with water." And they filled them up to the brim. He said to them, "Now draw some out and take it to the chief steward." So they took it. When the steward tasted the water that had become wine and did not know where it came from, though the servants who drawn the water knew, the steward called the bridegroom and said to him, "Everyone serves the good wine first and then the inferior wine after the guests have become drunk. But you have kept the good wine until now." Jesus did this, the first of his signs, in Cana of Galilee, and revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. After this, he went down to Capernaum with his mother, his brothers, and his disciples, and they remained there a few days. This week, our focus text is the wedding at Cana, Jesus' first miracle where he turned water into wine. Several years ago, my husband and I were at the Louvre in Paris, and we were able to see the amazing painting of this miracle. It's huge, as in like 22 feet by 32 and a half feet. It's filled with all of the noise and activity that you would expect at a wedding. Guests, food, entertainment, serving staff, and even a few animals running around. And in the midst of all of that busyness, there's an image of a man pouring wine from a large vase into a serving jar. Water from a jar, the large vase, it was actually a jar for the rite of purification, turned into wine. That shocked the steward because it was better wine than what was served before. It was a miracle that was experienced by many, but only witnessed by a very few, lost in the chaos of the day. I wonder how often there have been little miracles happening around us that we've missed because we're lost in the sauce. We're consumed by everything else that's going on. Maybe we're hyper-focused on one specific thing. We have a book at home that is absolutely fantastic that we read to our kids. It's called If You Give a Mouse an iPhone. And in a nutshell, it tells the story of this little mouse who goes on an adventure with a boy to the amusement park, to the zoo, and ultimately a deserted island. But the mouse has absolutely no idea that any of this happened because he was glued to the boy's iPhone the whole time. Does this scenario sound familiar? Believe me when I say that I'm not calling out any one particular group here, because I think all of us get hyper-focused on something, and it causes us to miss out on all of the life around us. Throughout the month of July, our first reading is Psalm 46. It's a psalm urging us to be still and know that God is God. And this pairs well with the wedding at Cana, as it encourages all of us to look beyond the things that draw our attention away from God and to be still, to sit in the stillness, sit in the silence, breathe in the world around you and listen to what God is saying. Pay attention to how God is working. It is so hard to stop and take breaks, and I get it. It's hard to slow down when you're on the carousel or the moving sidewalk. The carousel never stops moving. The sidewalk keeps going. There's always something else to do. As I was writing this, it was July 3rd, and I was at the lake. I wanted to read a book, but I knew, nope, I need to get this message written. There are always more clothes to fold, more dishes to wash, more projects to finish, more work to get done. How can we stop to listen for God or to watch for a miracle when there's so much noise around us, so many things to check off the to-do list? I could say, well, just make the time. But I know as well as anyone else that it's way easier said than done. The painting of the wedding at Cana, it shows us something pretty miraculous. It shows God at work, even when we weren't paying attention. God is always at work when we don't notice the miracles being done. God is at work through the awesome things that happen in our lives, and in the worst case scenarios when those happen. God's at work when we have a mini crisis. Running out of wine at a wedding during Jesus' time, it might not seem like a big deal, but it was a huge faux pas. It would have brought embarrassment to the family, as it would show a lack of preparedness and a lack of hospitality. A vast majority of those in attendance, they had no idea that there was this brewing crisis of the wine running out. And they never knew, because Jesus intervened. A miracle occurred and they didn't notice. And I think God works like that a lot in our lives. Miracles happen every day. God works through things both great and small, and a lot of times we have no idea it's happened. But it doesn't make those instances any less of a miracle. I wonder how much we miss by not paying attention to the world around us, by not being still and knowing that God is God. A few years ago, Disney released the movie Encanto about a family who each had a special gift. So in this family, one person could talk to animals, one had hypersensitive hearing, another could grow flowers anywhere, another could heal with her cooking. There was one member of the family, Mirabelle, who did not have a gift. At least, she didn't have a gift that others could immediately see. She and her family saw her as the odd one out, the one who was still treated like a small child, because they didn't realize that her gift was binding the family together. Sometimes the miracles and gifts that we have from God are not obvious. They're not as flashy or as noticeable as some other gifts, but they're still incredibly important and indispensable. Jesus turning water into wine, it wasn't a huge flashy miracle. In fact, it went largely unnoticed. But it didn't make it any less of a miracle. The good news for us is that even when we are so hyper-focused on our own lives, God is still working in and among us. The big bummer is when we fail to recognize God's work because we're so busy, because we're so focused on other things, sometimes things that aren't nearly as important. Maybe we're like the mouse in the story who goes on this grand adventure and completely misses the adventure, doesn't notice because he was so engrossed in his phone. Maybe we're like the guests at the wedding party who don't even realize that the wine nearly ran out, but Jesus turned water into wine to save the party. Maybe we're the person who's waiting for a miracle, failing to see how special we are, what gifts we bring to the table, and how God is already working miracles through us and around us. Sometimes it takes us taking a step back, being still and reflecting on God's work in our lives and God's work in the world to notice and realize the miracles around us. So take the time to be still, however you need to be still. Find a quiet place. Try to turn off the noise around you if it's possible. Try to hear yourself think and reflect on God and the world around you. Know that even when you don't see it, even when you don't notice it, God is working miracles in your life. Thanks be to God for all of these miracles. Amen. During the next few days, I encourage you to go deeper with the message with these 2 reflection questions. The first, how often do you find yourself so focused on one thing that you completely miss out on what's going on around you? And is there a balance that you can find with paying attention to your task at hand while also noticing other things happening? And the second, how can you take time to be still and notice the miracles that God is performing all around you?